In every woman's life, there comes a moment when a single wrong decision can undo everything she has built so carefully and for so long. What happens when you betray the person you love most in the world? And what price might a forbidden passion exact? This story, full of unexpected twists and dramatic events, begins when our protagonist marries Marcos, the man of her dreams. Their wedding, held in a small church in her hometown, was like a fairy tale. The white dress, Marcos's radiant smile, the tears of joy in their mother's eyes, every detail was etched in her memory as if it were yesterday. A modest reception in her parents' garden, dancing, laughter, and toasts to a happy future, everything promised a carefree life. However, a few months after the wedding, Marcos decides to move to the family farm to support his father, Javier, who was left alone after his wife's passing. For the protagonist, this becomes a significant challenge, as she, a city dweller, had never lived in the countryside. Yet, for her love for Marcos, she agrees to this step, full of uncertainty. The long and tiring journey to the farm was filled with Marcos's stories about his childhood there, his love for animals and the land. Upon their arrival, they are met by Javier, a tall and strong man with a kind smile that concealed the grief of his loss. He shows them their new home, a cozy wooden structure with a veranda, nestled amidst the green fields. During their first days on the farm, the protagonist experiences mixed feelings. On one hand, she is happy to start a new life with Marcos, but on the other, she feels like an outsider in this unfamiliar world. Nevertheless, she is determined to do everything possible to ensure their family's happiness. She has no idea yet that this move will be the beginning of a chain of events that will forever change her life, her marriage, her values, and her understanding of love and loyalty. The first weeks on the farm are spent adapting to the new way of life. The protagonist, accustomed to the city's hustle and bustle, learns to adjust to the rhythm of rural living. Marcos, on the other hand, feels like a fish in water here, enthusiastically helping his father with farm chores. The protagonist takes care of household duties, making their new house a home, and assists Javier in the garden, getting acquainted with the variety of vegetables and herbs surrounding them. Gradually, as Marcos spends more and more time in the fields, she begins to grow closer to Javier. At first, it's just brief morning greetings and shared tea breaks, but over time, their conversations become longer and more personal. Javier tells her about his youth, about meeting Marcos's mother, and how they built the farm together. The protagonist shares her memories of city life, her dreams, and hopes for the future with Marcos. Without realizing it, she starts looking forward to these encounters with Javier, finding comfort and support in his presence. He always finds kind words, jokes to lift her spirits, or a shoulder to lean on. One day, when Marcos goes to town for tractor parts, the protagonist and Javier spend the entire day together in the garden, talking about life. That evening, sitting on the veranda and admiring the sunset, she feels an inexplicable connection with Javier, a sense of comfort and understanding. Looking back, she realizes that it was at this moment their relationship began to change. What started as a simple friendship between a daughter-in-law and her father-in-law gradually grew into something more, something deeper and more complex. But at the time, she was too blinded by the warmth and attention Javier gave her to see the danger. She knew she was walking on thin ice, ice that could shatter everything she had built with Marcos. Yet, immersed in her own loneliness and need for connection, she chose not to see the warning signs. She allowed herself to be swept away by the current of emotions, unaware that she was heading into turbulent waters that threatened to drown her. One day, when Marcos went to town for supplies, the protagonist and Javier were left alone at home. On a hot summer day, the air was charged with a tension that had been building between them for weeks, perhaps even months. The protagonist decided to make lemonade to cool off. As she was squeezing lemons, she felt Javier's gaze on her. It was a look she had noticed more and more frequently, a look that made her feel awkward and flustered at the same time. She tried to ignore it, focusing on preparing the drink. But when she finished and offered Javier a glass, their fingers brushed, and an electric jolt ran through her body. What would happen next? In the quiet kitchen, broken only by the faint clinking of dishes, they sat facing each other. Unspoken words hung heavy in the air between them. Paula, I've needed to tell you this for a long time, he said, his voice muffled and slightly strained. I know it's improper, but I can no longer hide my feelings for you. His words stunned her, though deep down, she had always sensed his affection. But now that it was spoken aloud, the reality of what was happening crashed down on her with full force. Javier, I don't know what to say, she stammered, feeling her heart painfully constrict in her chest. This is wrong, I'm married. I know, he replied, moving closer to her. But I can't help how I feel. With you, I feel more alive than ever before. You understand me, Paula, like no one else. His words touched the deepest corners of her heart, places she had tried to ignore. For, in truth, she too harbored feelings for Javier. He gave her a sense of being desired that she had long forgotten. Before she could grasp the consequences, she felt herself leaning into his lips. In that moment, everything else ceased to exist. She forgot about her marriage, about him being her husband's father. All that remained in her mind was the passion that ignited between them. They made love right there, on the kitchen table, with a desperation and longing she had never experienced before. As they lay beside each other, trying to catch their breath, the realization of what had happened began to sink into her mind. She had betrayed her husband, crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. Yet, seeing the love and tenderness in Javier's eyes, she could not fully repent of what she had done. This day became a turning point in their lives. They knew that life would never be the same. Their actions were reprehensible, but they could not deny the feelings that had blossomed between them. From that day forward, their secret affair began. They stole moments to be together. They lived for the brief flashes of happiness that their forbidden love offered. However, deep down, she knew it couldn't last. They were playing with fire, and someone was bound to get burned. But what price would they have to pay for these moments of passion? The following months were filled with clandestine meetings. Javier and Paula seized every opportunity to be alone, every stolen moment, while Marcos was busy working in the fields or away from the farm. They met in the barn, in the cornfield, anywhere they could find privacy. In those moments, the outside world ceased to exist. It was just the two of them, lost in their love and the connection that had formed between them. One day, in particular, stood out in her memory. Marcos had gone to town for a meeting with other farmers, and she took the chance to arrange a picnic in the meadow behind the house. They spread a blanket under a spreading oak tree and enjoyed their food and each other's company. Lying on the grass, her head on Javier's lap, she felt happier than ever before. With him, she could be herself, without pretense or hiding her feelings. It was an intoxicating feeling. How I wish we could stay here forever, just you and I, without worries or the need to hide anything, she whispered, stroking his hair. I know, my love. I'd give anything to be with you like this always, without having to steal these moments, Javier sighed. But they both knew it was impossible. She remained Marcos's wife, and Javier was his father. Their connection was not only immoral but also had the potential to destroy their family. And yet, they couldn't stop their meetings. They were drawn to each other like magnets, a force stronger than reason and judgment. Every time they tried to part, they found themselves returning to each other, unable to resist the pull. But even amidst moments of happiness, a feeling of guilt never left her. Every time she looked at Marcos, every time he kissed or touched her, her conscience tormented her. She was cheating on her husband, the man with whom she had vowed to spend her life. She tried to justify herself, convincing herself that Marcos had become distant and no longer paid her attention as before. She persuaded herself that what she had with Javier was something special, a once-in-a-lifetime love. But deep down, she knew these were just excuses. The truth was, she had allowed her selfish desires to override her marital duty. She had been weak, succumbing to temptation without thinking of the consequences. And the consequences, as she would soon discover, were far more serious than she could have ever imagined. Despite all their precautions and efforts to conceal their affair, the truth always finds its way out, and when it did, not only her marriage but also the entire life she had built was jeopardized. On that fateful day, when the veil of secrecy finally fell, everything began as usual. Marcos, as always, had departed at dawn for the northern reaches of the estate to oversee fence repairs. Paula, seizing the moment, decided to indulge in their secret passion with Javier. They were so engrossed in each other, as if in a cocoon of their own feelings, that they completely let their guard down and didn't notice approaching footsteps. By the time they realized, it was too late. The barn door swung open, and Pedro, one of the farmhands, appeared in the doorway. His face reflected a range of emotions, astonishment turning to shock, then to disgust. "Dona Paula. Don Javier. What is going on here?" he exclaimed, disbelieving his eyes. Paula recoiled from Javier as if touched by hot iron. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest, like a bird caught in a cage. "Pedro, it's not what you think," she stammered, realizing how pathetic and ridiculous her words sounded. Pedro had caught them in a passionate embrace, their bodies intertwined in a dance that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. "I can't believe my eyes. Don Marcos trusts you, and you repay him with such vile ingratitude?" Pedro exclaimed, shaking his head in indignation. "You betray his trust for this?" His voice dripped with contempt. "Pedro, please, I know it looks terrible, but give us a chance to explain everything," Paula tried to argue, but Pedro was adamant. "There's nothing to explain. What you're doing is an abomination, and Don Marcos deserves to know the truth," he blurted out, then turned and swiftly left the barn, leaving Paula and Javier stunned, with the crushing realization that their world was about to collapse. The following days turned into a chaotic whirlwind of emotions. Pedro had kept his word, he met with Marcos and insisted that Javier reveal what had happened. Paula saw Javier consumed by guilt and remorse, as if by a heavy burden. He agreed to tell Marcos everything. Paula vividly remembered that fateful night when the truth came out. Marcos had just returned from the fields, and they were sitting down for dinner when Javier asked him for a private conversation. As the men withdrew, Paula nervously wrung her hands, sensing the impending storm. Only a few minutes passed before she heard Marcos's shouts, usually reserved and good-natured, now filled with rage and pain. "My own wife with my own father," she heard his cry, full of despair. This was followed by the sound of breaking dishes, as if the fragments of their former life were shattering. Paula knew that words that would wound her most deeply were about to be spoken. "I never wanted to hurt you," she stammered, but Marcos was deaf to her excuses. "How could you do this to me?" "To our marriage," he whispered, his voice trembling with hurt. Paula had no words that could alleviate his suffering or in any way justify her betrayal. All she could do was weep and beg for forgiveness, realizing she had committed something unforgivable. That night, as Marcos packed his belongings to leave the farm, Paula understood that their marriage was over. The trust they had built for years, the love they had shared, everything was destroyed by her infidelity. And though a part of her heart still longed for Javier, she knew their affair was doomed under the weight of public condemnation and scorn. As she watched Marcos's pickup truck speed away, his silhouette disappearing into the night, she felt a part of her die. She had lost her husband, her life, everything, for a fleeting surge of passion, a moment of weakness that would now haunt her for the rest of her days. In the days following Marcos's departure, Paula descended into a state of chaos and confusion. The farmhands, who had been loyal to their family for years, now looked at her with pity and judgment. She caught their whispers behind her back, their sideways glances and hushed conversations when they thought she wasn't listening. Javier, in turn, was consumed by guilt, like a shadow, sitting on the veranda and staring blankly into space. Their communication was reduced to formal phrases, tension and the realization of the chasm that now separated them hung between them. "We need to stop this," he told her one day, his voice tired and resigned. "What we did is wrong, Paula. It cannot continue at Marcos's expense," Javier said with sadness in his voice. Paula knew he was right, but it did not lessen her emotional pain. Despite all circumstances, the guilt and the shame, her feelings for Javier had not faded. She still loved him, still craved his touch. But she also loved Marcos. He had been her friend, her rock for so many years. The thought of losing him forever, of living without him by her side, seemed unbearable. Over the next week, Paula desperately tried to contact Marcos, bombarding him with messages, begging him to come home, promising they could fix everything. But her pleas went unanswered. Marcos refused to see her. Meanwhile, guilt and remorse consumed Paula. She neglected her household duties, spending entire days in bed, crying until her tears ran dry. Javier tried to comfort her, but his presence only intensified her suffering, reminding her of what they had done and the pain they had caused. Soon, rumors of her transgression began to spread throughout the community. At first, it was just whispers, sideways glances, and hushed conversations behind her back. But soon, it escalated into something more, into open condemnation. In the market square, poisonous rumors coiled like snakes. "They say she orchestrated it from the beginning," whispered one vendor, casting a sidelong glance. "She married Marcos just to ensnare his father," another chimed in, savoring the gossip like a juicy fruit. "I always felt there was something off about her," a third added, adding fuel to the fire. "Poor Marcos, he deserves better," another sighed sympathetically, poisoning the communal well. Paula couldn't bear it. She fled, feeling tears sting her eyes and her heart pounding in her chest. Did everyone truly see her as nothing more than a selfish destroyer of family bonds? Time passed, weeks turned into months, but the poisoned arrows of gossip continued to pursue her. Her infidelity, like a brand, had nailed her to the pillar of shame. She was no longer simply Paula, Marcos's wife, Javier's daughter-in-law. Now she was Paula the betrayer, the woman who had violated sacred marital vows. And though deep down she yearned to scream about her love for Javier, she understood the futility of these attempts. Ultimately, her actions were a monstrous mistake. Betraying her husband, destroying her marriage, that was the bitter truth she had to confront. The divorce arrived in the form of a white envelope, delivered by a faceless messenger on one of the damp, chilly days. Despite her premonition of the inevitable, the black letters on the white paper were a devastating blow. Cold legal language transformed her personal tragedy into a dry statement of fact. Marcos sought to dissolve the marriage, citing irreconcilable differences, though the true reason was evident, her infidelity. With a trembling hand, she affixed her signature, and tears, falling onto the paper, blurred the ink. Thus, her married life officially concluded, destroyed by her own selfish actions. After the divorce, the farm became an alien, hostile place for her. Marcos no longer wanted anything to do with the house or the memories it held. This was especially painful, as the farm had been his dream, a legacy he wanted to pass down to his children. Now, because of her mistake, he was abandoning it all. Soon, Paula realized she couldn't stay there. Every corner, every beam was saturated with memories, of her happy life with Marcos, of her secret meetings with Javier, of their forbidden passion. It was unbearable. Gathering her belongings, she began preparing to leave, slowly at first, as if disbelieving what was happening, then faster, driven by mounting anxiety. She didn't know where to go or what to do, but she knew she had to run from the past, from the constant reminders of her mistakes and losses. On the eve of her departure, Javier appeared. In the preceding months, he had aged considerably, and his face reflected the full weight of their shared guilt. "Don't leave," he rasped, struggling to control his emotions. "We could try to fix things." But Paula merely shook her head, and tears welled up in her eyes again. "We can't, Javier. What was between us was a mistake. A beautiful, passionate, but still a mistake. I have to leave to try and live with this." He didn't argue, as if acknowledging the truth of her words. Instead, he held her tightly, pouring all his pain and despair into the embrace, as if trying to shield her from future suffering. For a moment, she allowed herself to melt into his embrace one last time. But they both knew this was the end. Their love, however strong it had been, couldn't survive everything they had done. It was poisoned by guilt and betrayal. Wiping her tears, Paula cast one last look at the life she had destroyed and walked into the unknown, hoping to find, if not happiness, then at least peace. A year had passed since she left the farm. Her life had shattered into a million pieces. It was a year of introspection, pain, and resignation. Wandering aimlessly, she scraped by with odd jobs, working as a waitress in a roadside diner, a receptionist at a cheap motel. She never stayed long anywhere, as if searching for a place where she could start anew, become a different person, not the woman who had betrayed her husband. During this period, she received news from Marcos. Through his lawyer, he informed her of the need to settle the final divorce formalities, the division of property and the sale of the farm. His messages were brief, dry, and utterly impersonal. It seemed he was communicating with a stranger, not the woman he had lived with for so many years. And perhaps that was true. The wife he loved ceased to exist the moment she succumbed to her passion for his father. Now she was merely someone from the past, someone who had caused him unbearable pain. With Javier, it was no better. Their rare phone calls were short and agonizing, filled with awkward silences. They loved each other, yet they had destroyed so many lives, including their own. How could they live on after all this? After a long absence, she once again stepped foot in her hometown, settled into a modest apartment, and found work at a local bookstore. Slowly but surely, day by day, she began to rebuild her life. The path was thorny and arduous. At times, the burden of guilt became almost unbearable, and a desperate desire to give up, to allow pain and remorse to consume her entirely, would arise. But despite everything, she kept moving forward, knowing she had to. She knew it was her duty to Marcos, to Javier, and to herself. Now, looking back at the past, she realizes that despite all her losses, she has gained something far more valuable and profound, an understanding of herself, the true meaning of love and forgiveness. She has learned her strengths and weaknesses, her capacity both to love and to cause pain. She doesn't know what the future holds for her, there is still much pain and many wounds that need healing. But for the first time in a long time, a glimmer of hope appeared in her soul, a faint, tentative feeling that she could forgive herself and move forward. For ultimately, that is all that remains, to keep going, day by day, with the hope that the future will bring new beginnings and second chances. And who knows? Perhaps, with time, she will find a way to reconcile with her past and embrace the present in its entirety. Yes, she made mistakes that will haunt her throughout her life. But she also knows that she is more than just the sum of her errors and failures. She is a survivor, a fighter, and despite all of life's adversities, she is confident that she will find the strength to overcome them. Step by step, day by day, she will continue her journey. Because that is what people do. That is what she must do, for Marcos, for Javier. But most importantly, for herself. Because ultimately, only she can write the rest of her story, and she intends to make it a story of redemption, hope, and self-love.